I am with Makespace Co-working. For those of you I don't know, which is a number of you, which is awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I look forward to meeting you later. So just a couple house rules. We're going to do 3 parts tonight. We're going to go the why of Makespace, the how of Makespace, and then we're going to do Makespace, as in we will work quietly or work collaboratively, depending on how you want to make the most of your night. I'm trying to think, there's one rule of Makespace, which we'll talk about later, but just so you know, we say the one rule of Makespace is ask people what they're working on, not what they do. You can ignore it, so that's fine. That's ask people what they're working on, not what they do, so you're not defined by the way you make money, and you're able to describe any curiosity or project that you have going on at the current moment. So thank you all so much for coming. And I'm going to have everyone close their eyes to start the presentation. And right now I am going to walk you through the possibility of it being 2018, not 2015. And as you hear my voice, what you're actually hearing is me introducing you as the speaker for tonight. And Megan, your eyes are open. And right now I'm talking about how you spent your time between October 15th, 2015 and October 15th, 2018. What you've been doing, how you spend your free time or your paid time, whatever the time might be. But the way you spend that time is in doing something that brings you unconditional joy, that you love doing, whether it's travel, whether it's understanding the reason for the universe, whether it's understanding the history of the United States, whatever it is, you have spent some percentage of your time doing that thing. And the reason I'm talking about it at length is because I'm about to introduce you as an authority on that thing, that you have scratched the surface on that curiosity between now and October 15th, 2018, and tonight you're here to present on it. You can open your eyes. And you might have thought of a few things. I know I said a lot in a short period of time, but what I'm going to have you do is, I know you're kind of clumped with people you know, but introduce yourself to someone near you and say your name. It's going to be very basic. You can say a little bit more, but I'm going to cut you off and say, "Hi, I'm Carolyn, and I'm an authority on blank," whatever that is. Go ahead. So 2 big things happened to me last year, which leads to the why Makespace and why we're all here tonight. The first thing is I lost my job really abruptly. I loved my job. I've been working in politics for 10 years, trying to get women and local candidates elected to office, specifically understanding why women don't see themselves as qualified to run in the same way men do. So I was focusing on the local level and trying to give folks the tools they would need to amplify to run for office. So I lost my job. I was working for a startup that gave local candidates tools for technology, so they could raise money online, so they could have email canvases, do fundraising campaigns. It was amazing. I traveled a bunch. I loved it. We ran out of money, as it goes with startups. So that first thing happened to immediately start reaching out to my network and trying to figure out what my next job was going to be. And then I got this quote handed to me by one of my creative mentors, Todd Henry. And he said, "We have to go brave enough to go counterculture, to build more white space into our world." And it kind of hit me because it was the first intentional pause I'd ever received in my career, having worked in politics at one gig after the next, nonprofits, campaigns. I loved what I did. I was super passionate about it. And all of a sudden I had this intentional pause. And I was like, wow, what am I supposed to do? Like, what I do is I work. You know, that's the way that there's 168 hours in a week, and that's the way we break it up, right? You work approximately 50, 60 hours of that. You sleep for part of it, hopefully. You have recreational time. What if I just sat in white space? What would happen, and where would that go? So I looked at my bank account. I had about 6 months saved of personal savings, and I reached out to some wealthy families I knew and asked them if they needed any babysitting. And I decided I was actually going to have to face myself and face this white space and see what would happen. So that is kind of where I am now and where I am advocating and encouraging lots of people to think about with MakeSpace. So when I faced the white space when I wasn't babysitting, I asked myself, what brings me unconditional joy? What are the things that make me feel alive? And I thought of that in the sense of the top of Maslow's hierarchy. What is the top being self-actualization? What is the thing that makes me feel like I'm larger than something than my small self? What is the thing that makes me feel like I'm the best version of myself? And so I didn't know the answer at all. And all I knew was that I wanted to reach the top of that pyramid. In fact, I still do right now. So the only way I could even begin to resolve this, and Nicole and I were just talking about this week, is I went on Amazon and I let myself buy 5 books. Like, I'm just going to buy books that pique my curiosity and see what happens, right? I'm giving myself the gift of white space. Life gave me the gift of white space. How am I going to spend it? How am I going to use it? And what I found when doing that, I ended up buying a lot of books on the creative process, specifically kind of what the essence of discovery is, and on community organizing, which was ironic because I'd already done a tremendous amount of community organizing in my work, but something was interesting to me about the philosophy behind it and some of the organizing theories behind it, because as many of you might know, as much as you enjoy your job or may not enjoy your job, or whatever it is that your job that keeps you occupied during the day, sometimes there's higher level theories and thinkings behind it that we don't get a chance to scratch the surface on, because who wants to study marketing when they're not sitting in their office marketing, right? But there are lots of interesting histories and philosophies that would probably enhance the quality of the work that you do. So I ended up studying community organizing after having done it for quite a while. So I came across Csikszentmihalyi, who's a Russian philosopher, and he said, when you start to scratch the surface of this truth and beauty pursuit, it feels like an exhilaration. You do feel truly alive because you're tapping into something, you're tapping into your potential, into your purpose. And Stephen Pressfield, who also writes about this pursuit, this vague concept of what it might be to actually tap into your highest potential, he says, ambition is the unique calling of your soul. It's the reason for your existence. So, for me, having studied ambition for so long when it comes to gender, specifically in women, I noticed that we feel a lot of shame around the thing we most want to do. And I kind of had to come to clarity with myself that ambition is kind of what you long to do, what calls you, not necessarily what you're going to get paid to do. And it's very frustrating for me, frankly, because I feel like there's a lot of literature out there or life coaches out there, or programs out there that recognize that a lot of us are unhappy at our jobs, and they think the cure is a $500 program that you sign up for, and all of a sudden you're going to find that thing you're meant to do. And A, there might not be that thing, and B, you might never need to get paid for it. A lot of artists, once they come into a role where they start getting paid for their art, they resent it tremendously, and they don't want to necessarily do that. So for me, it's a matter of how do you even let yourself get there, and what does it have to become, if anything? What if you spend an hour a week start to read those things, you start to scratch the surface. So I had these books, I had this time, sort of, I needed to babysit quite a bit to afford living in San Francisco. And the question that kind of surfaced for me was, what are the conditions that permit bravery? What do we need in order to step into our best selves? And what ended up happening, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, is that it turns out we use busyness as an excuse. It makes us feel important, it makes us feel needed. What if you had all the time and the space you needed, right? So not all the money, but all the time and the space. And anyone who's ever had a gap in their career or ever faced unemployment or self-employment knows exactly what this feels like. It's unbearable. It's actually, you think all you need is time and space to become your truest best self, and it turns out it's really hard to stay accountable. And so if you're a freelancer, this is something we talk quite a bit about in the Makespace community, motivating yourself to put on pants some days. Like, no one's going to know. You don't have to take the dreaded commute. You don't have to be there for someone. You don't have to respond to an email. And all of a sudden, your freedom means you have to face yourself every single day. And it's remarkably challenging. So those of you who know Brené Brown, she writes about vulnerability. She said, tough shit. If space is hard for you to face, then you can go back and go to a job where they pay you every day. Comfort and courage are mutually exclusive. So it's one or the other. And the grass is always greener on the other side. Those of you who know, who have faced both sides of it. It is awful having to take the same commute to get to the same job and feel like you're a peon in a large organization and that you're hoping to pursue someone else's dream. Okay, so quit. Flamboyantly quit your job, post on Facebook, tell everyone how liberated you are, and then face yourself every day and have to create something out of nothing. So what is the middle ground? Is there a middle ground? And she says there isn't. And so what I started to find, particularly in my situation where I happened to know the right people to reach out to find babysitting contacts, one of them gave me one of them, thank you, Ms. Joanna. And I realized this really, really important distinction that I want to make clear, if you remember nothing else from the presentation and from the experience tonight. The fact that passion is a privilege, and the fact that the choice to leave your job or for me to not immediately go get another job is a result of privilege. And we should check our privilege. And we don't need to feel guilty for our privilege, but we can use it we can leverage it to be of service to others. So, just so we're all clear on privilege, there's 3 types of stress that one might endure in their life. When you were born into a circumstance where you are worried about your safety, your health, your family situation on a daily basis, that's stressed by circumstance, and you're probably not going to find yourself in a San Francisco situation where you have the privilege of deciding to be a freelancer or starting a company or whatever the case may be. You are worried about your safety on a day-to-day, and many of my friends who I know who grew up in poverty who were able to overcome it by going to college, by getting scholarships, by getting support, still have to send money home to their families. So even when you overcome it, sometimes you don't actually overcome it. It may seem that way if they went to your Ivy League school with you, but don't think that that's necessarily the case. And that is why I have learned I'm in no position to tell anyone how to live their life. I have no idea where you're coming from, what kind of medical histories there are, what kind of unforeseen expectations, circumstances, disasters, and all I can do is check my privilege and be clear about where I come from, and then let people make decisions on their own based on what works for them in their circumstances. So that said, the second category, many of whom of us are in that situation, the stress by choice. The fact that we have had the privilege to opt into hardship, right? So think about the primary things that are causing stress in your life right now. Whether it's a mortgage, I understand, and you chose to buy a house, right? So that's a stress that you took on. If it's, making sure your kids have childcare, you had kids, and again, if you had kids not by choice, that would fall back into the first category, not the second. So stress by choice is interesting because I think it's the root of the millennial anxiety. I think that's how a lot of the media stuff is trying to leverage the fact that we are stressed and we're unhappy. I think we're the most anxious generation, frankly. I'm writing a piece now about why. And I think it's interesting that we pick the jobs we have, we pick the fact that we want to live here in this glorious, expensive city, and yet we feel incredibly burdened by it. So what do we do, and how do we do anything? Can we do anything? And some folks will invest a lot of money in therapy and coaching, hoping that helps. I'm not against therapy or coaching, but I also fundamentally believe you already have everything you need, so we'll talk about that. The third category, stress by conviction. So again, checking my privilege, the reason I had 5 or 6 months of savings when I lost my job was because I didn't have student loans, right? So I was in a situation where I was able to give myself some runway because of my background. And when you have stress by conviction, it means you choose to take a path less traveled. You choose to try freelancing. You choose to start a company. If you have that access because of, because you paid off your student loans, because you have a trust fund, because you have access to an investor, that is okay, but make sure that the way that you're spending that money and that time is to be of service to others. Because what people don't realize about the top of Maslow's hierarchy, about the self-actualization, is you will never feel fully fulfilled or self-actualized unless the work you do is of service. You can't self-actualize in a silo. So, privilege, so we're all clear on that. So, this is Zenobia. So, Zenobia was my co-working buddy. And basically what happened is I faced my space, I faced my privilege. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. I figured it out to make it work. I could still afford to go to yoga, most importantly. And I was going to dig back into my academic interests, which were studying ambition and trying to get to the root of how we identify what our callings are and how we pursue them with bravery. And I was incredibly lonely while I was doing this. I thought all I needed was time and space to really become the best version of myself. And it turns out there's incredible shame that comes when everyone else is at work during the 9 to 5. And going to coffee shops didn't help me because no one talks to you there and everyone's on their headphones. So it's like, okay, so this was my temporary fix for having a co-working buddy. Co-working spaces are like $700 a month in San Francisco. There's an abundance of them, but they're rather expensive. So Zenobia helped me start to discern what does it take to pursue ambition. This is when I get a little wonky because this is my favorite topic. So after reading quite a bit of information, both around the spiritual definitions behind creativity, the literature on productivity, there's a lot of, it's kind of very gendered, which I find, which is interesting. There's a lot of men who write about how to be successful and productive and ambitious, and there's a lot of women who write about the magic and the serendipities. So my goal is to kind of infuse them, to have this, because there is an element of magic to the creative process, as all of you know. Anyone who's had a breakthrough when they walk onto a bus or go into a hot tub or whatever the case may be, but there's also a lot of very practical knowledge that's important to acknowledge. So basically I came up with a spectrum which shows how you both launch and sustain, because a lot of people are in the business of helping you find what you're meant to do. I'm in the business of sustaining it, the putting on the pants every day and feeling motivated to keep going. So very briefly, and I can talk about this more after, but I don't want to spend too much time on it, we found that no matter how much you accomplished yesterday or today, tomorrow morning you start at the bottom of the mountain. So it almost doesn't matter. Every day you have to face yourself and you have to face your dreams. And people think that once you have achieved some level of success, then it's just smooth sailing, and it turns out it gets even harder because you start to see how much further you have to go. And so I find that I have to basically forgive myself every day. Like all the shame expressions that would come up around not accomplishing enough yesterday, or not reading enough, or not doing enough. It's like you start fresh. Every day is a fresh slate. And if you're willing to step into that acknowledgement and that confidence, what you learn is that when you have insecurities, they're telling you something. That means that you have room for growth. And if you develop a relationship to your insecurities as if a friend were telling you that they struggle with these things, you treat yourself like you treat a friend, you find that it's actually okay, and it actually means that you understand what growing means, which is that you always have further to go. There's this mysterious energy that always wants us to keep growing. So you believe you can, blindly, even if you think you can't. And then if you are willing to open that book, to scratch the surface, to start writing that Medium post, what the goal is that you would achieve a level of flow, that where your anxiety meets your boredom. Because people can probably relate to this given different roles you've had. What Chisholm and I writes about, the psychologist I mentioned earlier, is that you can achieve flow, you can get into that state for like an hour or two of concentration if the task before you is not so difficult such that you feel like you can't achieve it, or it's so boring that you feel like it's just like punching out, punching in, and it's easy. So if you want to have the quality of attention, if you've let yourself launch in, then you can achieve flow, and you can get into your zone. When you achieve flow, you will feel vitally alive. You will move into something that feels rich, that feels real. It's a richness that can't be described, And the best way to compare it is the way you feel when you're watching sports, when you're connected to religion, sex, the creative process. There are feelings that make you feel larger than you are, and oftentimes that is what the creative process is and can feel like. And whether it's intellectual curiosity or spiritual inquiry, letting yourself get into that flow and get into that zone can produce an aliveness that is remarkable. And that's kind of where my research started taking me when I was understanding kind of how Einstein did it and how some of these great inventors and scientists would be able to sustain the momentum to keep getting into this. And it's because they were addicted to the flow. They wanted to feel like they had that capacity to be greater than they are and grow, continuously grow. And so I am breaking it down now. I'm writing a book about this creative courage. And very briefly, but I have a kind of a 5-phase process that I believe we all require in order to truly get into that flow. And the first is the invitation. The first is seeing every choice you make in your life as a choice. And again, going back to the privilege chart, assuming that you have some degree of choice, you've been able to choose the kind of job you have some agency over your life. When you treat everything in your life as an invitation, you start to respect your time a little bit more. You start to say, is this for the benefit of my growth? Because it turns out you can't compartmentalize work and play. You can't, because you are all works in progress. So every piece of data that comes into your head and comes into your realm of focus throughout the day affects who you are. Ultimately, if the things at work are not making you feel like a bigger, brighter person, that's probably why you're unhappy at work. You are a work in progress. So when you treat those invitations as your own, as your agency, then you can show up. Then you can decide, I'm going to be there and I'm going to show up fully. Like you all chose to show up tonight. Thank you so much. So you received an invitation and something went off, whether it was just coming here to support me, which I'm very grateful, thank you, or you thought maybe you would learn something or maybe you would meet someone. But at the essence of every single discovery or any possibility of anything positive happening in your life is around showing up. And so when you show up, you plant seeds. So it's a trial and error process. You might get nothing out of tonight and feel like it was a waste of your time, but the fact that you tried and the fact that you were willing means that you have that level of self-respect. It's almost showing yourself that you're going to step into unknowns because you're that committed to that aliveness. Now, here's the thing about belonging, which happens. So you show up, and did you see me? Did you get greeted? Did you see someone you didn't know was going to be here and recognize them? How does a space feel when you show up? Because I have decided and realized that often if we get into a Facebook call for 2 hours and then feel a ton of shame about it after, it's not always your fault. The space you might physically be in might be affecting your ability to achieve flow or not. There's a lot of coffee shops, it's really interesting, in San Francisco that are always empty. I don't know if you noticed, some of the neighborhood ones are kind of dumpy and you probably don't want to sit on that couch. It's because they're not, like, there's a musty air, there's no natural light flowing in, the ceilings are kind of low. That's not a place where you're necessarily going to be your best self and scratch the surface. And it's just a generic public space. So what is the type of belonging that you can both find and access? So what I can find in San Francisco right now is right here. If I wanted to go to a networking event tonight, there's probably like 17 around this general block we could find, and I could pitch Make Space to someone. I could tell them exactly what I'm working on, and I don't know if you've felt this, but I often feel at networking events that people are really kind of searching. They're needy, they're really needy, so there's almost like a tugging of my energy that like they need a job or they need a date or whatever the case may be, but it's exhausting for me. It's a really depleting experience. So I started to come up with kind of what my dream would be if I decided to show up into a space. So I took all the opposites of what I feel now and what I would need. And it's this idea that, and this is very much how all of you make me feel, so thank you, is that you can be in draft form. That I'm now, these are ideas that I've been working on for the past year. This presentation will be different in 6 weeks. That's the essence of the creative process, of drafting things, sharing them, getting feedback. I got a lot of feedback from the last time I was here, and so that's what helped evolve this presentation. But what if people saw the higher being you're capable of becoming and didn't expect you to be the fullest, best version of yourself in this moment? Because we're not, because we're growing, because we're millennials. And so that was really what I needed and what I know I needed. And this is when I got really sad. So I made Zenobia as my co-working buddy. I grudged through the loneliness. I was going to read all these books and write all these theories. And all of a sudden, I realized, despite having all this space for liberated yet isolated. I was too lonely, I could not sustain the momentum, so I started looking for jobs again. This was maybe about 2 or 3 months into my free time. And what I noticed I did, and those of you who know me well will laugh at this, but basically I was so excited that I had this breakthrough that I wanted to learn more about creatives and community that I started planning our wedding. I'm like, we had our first date, it went really well, and now I see our future. And it doesn't work that way. It turns out it's like you have to spend years on getting to know someone and making sure you're compatible and all those things I'm not as well versed in. So back to Steve Pressfield, he said, it turns out you're going to feel like this no matter how much success you achieve, or whether you achieve success. The fear doesn't go away. It runs by the same code, the resistance aims to kill. So we all feel this every day, and nothing was more mind-blowing for me than to not only feel this for myself, having not achieved anything, but then to read Stephen Covey talk about it in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. At the end, he says, I haven't accomplished any of these habits. I teach what I need to know. Great, thanks. Gloria Steinem wrote a book called Revolution from Within about the essence of self-esteem. The intro talks about how she had to rewrite the entire book. She spent 2 years on it, and her editor was like, Gloria, I think you have a self-esteem problem. And she didn't inject any of her personal story into the book. It was strictly like dry academic law. And this comes up over and over. Brene Brown says she writes the books that she needs to read for herself. Elizabeth Gilbert just wrote a book about the creative process. These are literally people, these are experts talking about how much they struggle. So it made me feel better in that I'm not the only one, but not enough to be able to sustain my work ethic. But here we go. So we're not production robots, to be, as clear as possible. Basically, I was so ashamed of the fact that I have feelings, that I'm a human, that I couldn't sustain the ethic on my own. So Parker Palmer, who writes about communities of belonging, he said, of course you can't sustain it. The journey is too taxing to be made alone. We need each other. We need to support each other and show up for each other. He has this other great quote that I just read yesterday, and he says, it's easy to get lost in the labyrinth of the inner life, and it's easy to get lost in the confusion of the crowd. That we need both silence and we need community. So how do we reconcile that? How do we possibly face the things we most want to face and show up for ourselves and show up for our friends and our family who need us? So I'm going to pause. I have about another 10-ish minutes left of the presentation, but I want to open up questions now, just to break things up a little bit, and see if there's anything I said too quickly or unclear, that was unclear, and then we'll go into the how of Make Space. Anything? Okay. The how. And the how does involve guacamole, in case you were wondering about that. So here I am. I'm in a position where I've been able to somewhat identify the things I'm interested in, not knowing what it means, where it's going. I know I want to write a book about the creative process, but I'm feeling too lonely to really get through and go to a library every day or sit in my living room by myself. So I started to think about what I needed when it came to this quiet tribe idea, and I needed a place that encouraged me to explore my ideas. I needed a place like college, with the College Campus Center, that would make it easier for me to have this experience, and that would almost cultivate my quality of attention as opposed to distract it. And so I started thinking about this stranger spectrum, this idea that what if you're around people that make you feel alive, that make you feel worthy and willing, but they're not necessarily all your best friends? What if they are a little bit more than strangers? So not anonymous people sitting in a coffee shop, but people who are equally struggling and working towards that gem. Can we have someone that's, here's a stranger and here's a friend? Can we kind of be in the middle? And what if we have a really engaging connection and it doesn't lead to a Facebook friend request, or it doesn't lead to some text after to invite to my birthday party? What if we just genuinely show up for the other person? So I realized we needed a secret society for creative souls. And hashtag introverts are awesome. And so that was kind of how Make Space was birthed. And this was October 17th last year, so it was almost exactly a year ago. Tonight is the 60th gathering in 52 weeks. And the idea was that not only would we gather together quietly, but also we would make it an invitation-only group. So in Silicon Valley, that can often be defined as exclusive. We like to call it intentional. Anyone who requests an invitation was welcome to come, but we wanted there to be an element of choice. We wanted people to come because they wanted to be there, not because they ended up there. And when you show up in a place by choice, you have that much more curiosity and attention for the other person. We used to say there were no rules. The one rule that emerged organically was this notion of it not being networking, because people didn't want to have to feel like they were on when they were working, right? So you should see the crazy clothes we all wear in Makespace. Like, be cozy, sit on the floor. Like, the idea is like we're working, we're in draft form. Don't interrupt me, but please interrupt me, because I'm super lonely and I'm dying to talk about this idea that I'm working on. So kind of this in between. So 3 things happen when you come to Makespace. And we also couldn't afford space to gather, so we started finding underutilized spaces. We started finding restaurants when they were closed during the day. We started finding photography studios, people's houses, whatever space was available for us that met the conditions, like I said, of natural light, high ceilings, feeling like we were safe and comfortable in a space that was a little bit more inviting than a coffee shop we would activate. We found about 24 spaces that met those requirements. So when you come to Makespace, when you show up, ideally you get greeted by Meg or me, or you get a hug if you want. And so you can choose your adventure. There's one of 3 things that often happen. And you don't have to start at any one place. But let's say you start at input. So you're there to get to work, right? You're there first and foremost for yourself. Selfishness is expected, is permitted. Because every other place in your life, people call you out for being selfish and feel guilty about it. At Makespace, you're there for yourself. You're there to get to work. So you're there, you can put on headphones, you don't have to, you're planting your seeds. I often encourage people when they achieve flow, it's kind of a weird thing, but it's something that works for me to sustain my momentum, is to actually quit while they're ahead. Is actually, if they're in a flow, if they've written a bunch of emails for 30 minutes, close your computer and make space and actually walk away. Because then you'll be excited to go back to the work, as opposed to burning yourself out and then resenting your computer and not wanting to look at it again for 3 days. So you input for as long as you want. You can spend all day working, reading, writing, whatever you need to do. It's a conducive space, lovely music and chocolate to help you achieve your flow. The space is where the magic happens. It's when you happen to just have a serendipitous connection with someone. It usually happens around the guacamole bowl. But we find that when you're surrounded in a space by people who have not only showed up by choice, but who are also genuinely interested to learn what you're working on and also desperate to get out of their own heads, then some sort of realization can occur, because you're actually not obsessing about your own stuff, you're listening to someone else. And it turns out I give better advice to you than I give to myself. I'm a better listener for other people than I am for myself sometimes. And then the output is, if you feel a sense of safety, of trust with that person, share something you've never said out loud before. Say that you're an authority on whatever topic you said you were in the beginning. Because once you say it out loud, it makes it possible. It makes it real. And suddenly, by my saying, my dream is to give a TED Talk, you all know that now. If anyone knows anyone connected to TED, you might have me in mind. And at the very least, 6 months from now, we find each other and you go, oh, how's that going? We're doing the TED Talk. I'm like, oh shoot, I totally forgot. That was my dream. Thanks for holding me accountable. In the most casual of ways, but it's shocking what happens when you just say it out loud. It suddenly makes it real. So we like to call it gym for your mind at Makespace, because it turns out you can't just show up once. You can't go to the gym once and then be super ripped. You need to keep coming. You need to show up over and over and over again. And that's how you show yourself that you have that confidence and self-respect, even if you don't actually feel it. It's a paradox. You have to indicate and act confident in order to feel confident, which is something I'm still trying to figure out. But it's something that seems to work. So we call it not only our quiet tribe, but also we're the community of explorers, because explorers are drawn to know what's out there, but we're not sure we have the courage to face it. So you have to actually start to find out, that space is really daunting and overwhelming. And we hold your dreams. So the other thing is, when you come, you're basically coming back to where you left. You're never penalized for not coming to Makespace. You're rewarded for showing up. So if and when you decide to come, we will hold your dreams for you. And therefore, the goal being that the more you show up, the more often you make more connections with the community, which now has about 512 people, there's an implicit freedom of expression and permission allowed in the culture, because we don't care, because we care. If that makes sense. We're not necessarily going to judge you or ask later. It's up to you how you want to move forward. So this is the beauty of the space. So most of you know this, not all of you, but I don't really care about co-working at all. So if you have a healthy relationship to this time you spend on your computer, what I'm more interested in, I'm not going to demonstrate because I'm going to ruin my thing, but there's this make space sticker here. I want you to close your computer and see where it says make space. To step away from the computer. And it turns out that that's when the magic happens. And I would not have a list of 512 people if many of you in the room hadn't spread the word to other people, hadn't given me ideas and feedback about the way the guacamole tastes or the way the music sounds. We need each other. And that's really where the magic happens. And it feels good to offer help. So one of the things I'm going to suggest when I wrap up in a couple minutes is we can either maybe we'll even divide the room, but you're welcome to use this time as an evening co-work as we described it, just kind of be around other people. If you want to kind of dig in a little bit more to the thing that you are currently working on or would love to work on, something that we're going to test is this notion of creative therapy, that sometimes we can feel really self-conscious and guilty when we talk about our thing for too long, or you immediately want to be responsive and ask people questions about them. I'm proposing that we partner up and we talk for 20 minutes. I'm going to talk for 20 minutes just about my thing, and then we'll switch. Then we'll talk 20 minutes about your thing. And you have permission to really dig into the details, and I can ask you questions, and I can really get the depth of what it is that you love and what you care about, because it feels good on the other side to offer people help. It makes you feel worthy. It makes you feel like you're being of service. So let me see. Okay. I think I mostly covered everything, but the idea being is that, again, when we go back to this religion, sports, sex analogy, when I think about what's happening in San Francisco and how things are changing and how many of us who don't make six figures feel like it's incredibly difficult to afford living here, a lot of that is because we don't feel like we're part of the bigger something. And the bigger something doesn't seem to be a something, because I know a lot of people who do make six figures are not happy doing it. They don't necessarily want to continue that job or continue working there. So this becomes a lot less about labels, about whether you work in tech or not, whether you're an artist or not. We all know there's many people who work in tech who are very creative and very visionary. We know there's a lot of bohemians and healers who are very entrepreneurial. So naturally, the way the media has kind of divided us is not real, and it's a Venn diagram, and most of us are in the middle, right? And a lot of people have used the word revolution, because I do have a background in politics, and I am a little bit revolutionary when it comes to make space. I would like to say that this is a renaissance. This is an opportunity for all of us who come from different backgrounds, with different dreams and different visions, to support each other and to make us feel like we're part of something larger than ourselves, because we realize that in order to feel safe and secure in the city, we have to be invested in the well-being of the whole. We need to be there for one another. And that will almost ensure that I am cared for and secure, because you know something about me and I know something about you. You are more than a stranger to me. And that is what I believe will bring us fully alive. Thank you so much. Questions? I'll leave that up.
Is this going to be available online?
Sure. That was a lot of information. You guys have questions. Lots of it. People have really personal questions. Ask me personal things.
What is really being in a state of flow feel like to you?
So, but the question is, what does being in a state of flow feel like? So, I lose track of time, I forget to eat, and I laugh out loud when I'm alone. So I have found that there's factors that can help invigorate your flow. So I have indulged in really colorful, fun markers. So I have my notebooks, as many of you have seen, and I use all these different colors. So it's what ways can you make your environment facilitate your flow? And I also have found, that's to answer your question, but the other piece I found, which has been interesting, is my brain needs to be compartmentalized. So I actually, when I'm in a space, whether it be make space or just alone, I make different parts of the room or my apartment for different activities. So I'm always in the process of writing something. So I have my journal in one area, and my books in another, and my laptop in another. So actually physically being able to move between activities or among activities has been really helpful for me to achieve flow. And the big thing being putting on the head. That it's bizarre, but when I am in flow, I will be like, nope, gonna close my computer, I'll deal with it in the morning. And that way when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, time to check my email, which is weird, but yeah.
How do you actually do that? You actually make yourself close the computer. And that's the one part I have.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, let's put it this way. You're not a doctor, and neither am I, so we're not on call. Like, there are literally no emergencies, and it feels like there's all these people, and trust me, I've been in real jobs before, or like they need things from you, they're waiting, like, we're doing the best we can. We're all doing the best we can. And it feels often that these urgent but not important emergencies are always at the top of our, again, these are all things that affect our attention. You are one person with this much time in your day, and every single thing that you let into your attention affects your ability to feel connected, to feel worthy, to feel strong. And that includes every single time you open up Twitter or Facebook, right? So it's like we're permitting all of this piece of content to come into our mind. Anyone who's ever done like a digital detox knows that in the first 24 hours of being offline, you still have a newsfeed scrolling through because of all the content you've stuffed in there, and it starts to slow down on day 2, and you're like, oh god. And so again, this notion of having to actually face yourself and realizing busyness isn't all that important. Scotty?
I'm asking this from a position of total ignorance because she just invited me here to videotape this. But is the objective of your group or you to find physical locations where people can meet, or is the objective to put together collaborations of people? Or is it more just a social thing, how people can get together and work together?
It's all the above, and that's a great question. So what it started as is it started to heal my own wounds, which is I'm a freelancer, and a lot of people ask, what do you do? Like, I'm unemployed, self-employed, I'm a writer, I'm a babysitter, I'm an entrepreneur, like, I can use lots of different titles, right? So initially it was to heal the fact that I felt ashamed during the 9 to 5, and I felt lonely, and I wondered where everyone else was. I would literally go to coffee shops sometimes and hand out flyers to people, and it's like, do you ever get lonely working alone? Because there are so many freelancers and entrepreneurs and people with non-traditional schedules, Lyft drivers and Whole Foods cashiers, but where are we? How do we find each other? And if you're someone who's like a massage therapist, I've heard this from a couple people, you're working behind a closed door all day. Like, that's incredibly isolating too. You're one-on-one if you're any type of therapist or kind of coach or nutritionist. So how do we create community in a way that doesn't require us to continue to be on? So it's this quiet tribe idea, which is like, can we support each other quietly? But what's happened, which has been an interesting evolution, is that a lot of folks resonate with our message but don't have flexibility during the 9 to 5 and want to find a way to plug into the creative community. So we just started a Facebook group, and we now have evening and weekend creative retreats. And the idea is that both we'll vote on the Facebook group, kind of what days work best for people if you want to do evening gathering, which we could do it as a private or a public event. And we have a space where we can do weekend retreats. And we've done it twice now, where it literally the gift of free time. And it's a hard business because I'm selling people nothingness, but I'm selling them everything, I'd like to think, because what happens again when you're faced with those 5 hours, and even if it's 1 hour, will you invest in yourself? Because, you think about your budget, it's like, I'll invest in rent, I'll invest in food, I invest in my physical well-being, like my gym, my yoga, I'll invest in my mental, spiritual well-being, which is my therapist, my coach. What about your space? What about your growth? What about your learning? Which after we graduate college, we seem to have lost the structure to keep going with, but if you don't scratch that surface, if you don't actually acknowledge that you have curiosities and you want to learn things, unfortunately that translates to other things. It turns into anxiety, it turns into lashing out on family members. Creativity doesn't go away. And the creative process in general is not just assigned to people who define as traditional creatives, as artists, as writers. The process of creativity is just having feelings. You have feelings that you want to express in some way. And I think that's been the biggest breakthrough I've had in doing all of this, which is the fact that when I use the word creative, it's really isolating for some people. They don't feel like they connect with or fit into the Makespace community per se, because I talk about we're all visionaries and creatives, and because I'm talking about what I see as possible from everyone, not necessarily how you define today. So that might be actually like a marketing piece I need to finesse. And figuring out, giving you a mind retreat, giving you space and a place to read, to write, to do that one thing that you're dying to do that you feel guilty about never doing. And sometimes it's easier to attach to the story, it turns out, when you have to face the space. But if you want to start a journal, if you want to read a book, if you want to plan an exotic trip, come to Makespace and devote those 2 hours. It's amazing to see how many people come to Makespace to plan that trip, to get started on that project. Or bring a pile of mail. Literally, people will bring things that they've been like bogging them down or bugging them that is stopping them from being creative, clearing out your inbox, paying your bills, dealing with your taxes. So actually, this is a conducive space to get the lowest hanging fruit, not just the high level flow pieces, but things that are blocking you from achieving flow. Yes.
Can you tell us more about Zenobia?
Zenobia. Yeah, what do you want to know?
So why leave Zenobia?
Oh, so, wow, that's a really good question. So, the reason I did Makespace was because of my Jewish grandmother, and whenever I would enter her house, I felt the utmost level of comfort and permission. I could take off my shoes, I could take off my pants, like, there was always food, it was like, that was a place where I knew that I belonged, and she saw the higher being in me, and that was what she named all her cars. So, yeah, all of her cars were named Zenobia. She's like, where is Zenobia? And she would like go around the parking lot trying to find it. And she thought that was like the worst name ever, and so she loved naming her car that. And after she died, I went over to, I was going to say I went to Bali, but actually I went to Alabama. And I drove around my last job trying to get women to run for office in Alabama. And it was the first time I felt truly alive, because the person who believed in my capacity, who believed in my aliveness, was dead. So I had to actually believe what she saw in me for the first time and not assume that it was always there. And so that's Zenobia, keeping me accountable to my capacity. Go ahead.
What was the biggest hurdle you faced when you wanted to get Makespace off the ground?
The biggest hurdle I faced when I wanted to get Makespace off the ground, I would say the target audience I'm going after, we tend to be the least reliable because we're the most busy. So I'm going after people who tend to travel a lot, who tend to be impulsive and sporadic, and we try to see how we feel every day before we make any commitments or decisions. So while I believe we're the most underserved market in San Francisco, we're also the hardest to target and to find, because if we're working behind a massage table or in our living room or in a coffee shop, how do we, you can't really create a Google ad to find people like that. So that was the first thing. And then the other thing was the sustenance. I've noticed that some folks will come, in the same way you treat the gym, some folks will come to Makespace like for multiple months on end and then drop off for a few months. And I noticed that there's almost like a shame in that they're like, oh, well, I'm not productive right now, I don't deserve to be there. And it's like, no. When you show up and come back, you can get back, you go back on the treadmill and you'll get back in shape again. But, how we all kind of feel about being in flow or not.
And follow-up, how did you overcome that?
I haven't. I found that the more I go the list, the more likely it is that I can get 20 people from the 500 to come. So when I was trying to get 20 people of 100, it was a lot harder. So the more friends of friends of friends who come through, and we are now above ground. We do publicize our events. We started about 3 months ago, and I publicize heavily now. But honestly, the best way, the biggest way I could overcome any hurdle was finding validators within the community who would market it that didn't require my work. Because at the end of the day, the way that I perceive Makespace and the way that I want it to be is have nothing to do with me at all. That I'm merely the facilitator. I create a space where people feel welcome and that they belong, and then I don't have to be there. In fact, Meg posted all of Makespace last week. I wasn't there at all. Made the welcome only and put everything out, and it was a huge milestone for us because it turns out it doesn't require just me to do it, and people can take care of themselves and can leave their computer out for a few hours, and they can be greeted. It doesn't have to be me being greeting them there. So this idea that you have validators within the community, and I love seeing what people post on Facebook or when they want to share the word and spread the word to other people, because those aren't my words. And in the beginning, that used to make me really like, oh, that's not my marketing language. And it's like, no, let them own it and let them share it the way that it means something to them, because they know what their community wants. What was your name?
Neon.
Nice to meet you.
I know one of the things that I struggle with a lot is having the sort of emotionally draining 9 to 5. It means that I often feel like I just don't feel like at the end of the day I can, get my part and come here instead of getting on work and going home.
Yeah, integrating the 9 to 5, totally. So there's a few things. One is finding your tribe, finding people that, you have a plan on Thursday, like 7 to 9. Something that's really manageable, doesn't feel overwhelming, that like it doesn't matter how you spend the rest of the weekend, you know for those 2 hours on Thursday that you're going to show it, like I'm expecting you to be there. So that there's other people who need that from you, because it's remarkable how often we simply don't feel like doing something, right? It's just, we're humans, we get tired. So that's one piece. The other thing is the way that I got started on all of this, I actually started it when I still had my job to an extent. I have always had this dream of being a writer and writing a book. And what I didn't know is I could picture myself at the top of a mountain publishing a book, but I didn't know I'd actually like climbing up. And so that's part of the problem with our disconnect with our dreams, is that we like the idea of it, but we don't know if we like the work that it's entailed to get there. So I started writing on Sunday nights. I would have like a special time where I would make plans, and again, it was only an hour or two. But what I found is when I start writing at 7 o'clock, sometimes it would spread to 10 or 11 p.m. That Csikszentmihalyi writes about this too, that the things that are best for us feel uncomfortable at first. It's not like you sit down at the computer and immediately achieve flow. And some of the best writers talk about that they still struggle, but they have to create this ritual around the experience. So that's my biggest advice with integrating 9 to 5 and recognizing your exhaustion levels is having one sacred hour set a week, and you'd be surprised how much that will probably spread. The other big piece of advice I give, and something that helped for me tremendously, is I have an 800-page Word document on my computer called my body of work. And as opposed to taking an hour or whatever, anytime I read anything online or read anything anywhere that moves me, that inspires me in some way, I copy and paste it immediately into this Word document. Because what happens is that over time, what accumulates is things that inspire you. So on one hand, you can pick a page anytime and just find something that is exciting, but most importantly, you start to see data about your life and about your patterns. And it's like, wow, for me it was that whenever I would go on like a yoga retreat or I would travel, this idea of space used to come up for me all the time. And why don't I feel like I have safe space in San Francisco? How do I access space? How do I feel clear and alive in a place that doesn't require me to go to Bali? Because that's not affordable. So I would recommend that also, which doesn't require any additional work other than the fact that if you are already like reading articles online or reading books and whatnot, whenever something like affects you, make sure you document it somewhere, because you're not going to remember. Our memories are terrible, it turns out.
I just want to weigh in on that point because it's something I struggle with a lot. I'm always really wiped after the day. But to Jenny's first point, or your progression of the 5, I think the invitation is what's been most impactful for me. I haven't even gone to Makespace that much, but knowing I can go makes me think about it in a different way. So it's like, oh, I could go there. What would I do? Oh, I would do that. And just beginning to think about what I would do. And then eventually I will go more because I have that invitation. So I think it's just having it there starts the conversation with myself about could I spend my time here talking.
Thank you. Yeah, the other thing I loved was Kate came to our 7th Makespace in January. It was January 21st or something like that, and she's like, so I'm working on New Year's resolutions. And I was like, that's awesome. She's like, it's a little late. And I'm like, but is it? We prescribe that January 1st is when we have to work on our New Year's resolutions. I love that story because every day can be January 1st. We don't need an arbitrary calendar to tell us when we need to jumpstart our year, jumpstart our ambitions. And I was more excited that she was doing them on January 21st. And that was a sacred space where she felt like she could do that because that's what was available. Any last questions? I'll be here also, Maggie.
What do you see as the next steps for Makespace, other than you mentioned, the ability for you to be less involved, but
Yeah.
Any other ideas and dreams to
Sure.
grow?
So next steps on Makespace. So my dream, my goal is that on any given day, any time, if you feel lonely, bored, anxious, or inspired, you can pull up an app or a calendar that shows you where you can go where other people are there feeling that way too, and that they're working. So evenings, weekends, whatever the case may be. I get a lot of asks for expanding to East Bay, North Bay, South Bay. I'm not opposed to that. I do feel like my instinct tells me to go deeper as opposed to wider right now, because right now we've kind of hit somewhat of a stride as far as people getting it, but also recognizing that there's no stereotypical makespace here, that we all have these capacities and these longings, and we all want to be our best selves and grow into that version. So my dream would be that we had the capacity and the wherewithal that there would be spaces all over the city to support that. Ideally, multiple spaces on the same day. So if there was a marina makespace and a mission makespace, I will pitch one company just because why not? There's a company called Breather, and they offer private spaces all over the city. I think your first hour is free if you just need a breather, which is great. We partnered with them over the summer. They gave us some spaces. The drawback of Breather is it's $25 an hour. So not exactly feasible, A, if you're trying to achieve flow, because sometimes it takes an hour of play before you actually get into the work. And B, just we're on a freelance budget. I mean, that's like more money than I make babysitting every hour. So I love where they're going. I wish that they were more open to having more groups to plug in. Right now, that's not within their plan, but they create beautiful spaces. And what I basically said to them, I said, what's the difference if you have 8 people paying $20 for the just hang out together for the day, or 8 people with individual hours? Like they really want to market themselves as private space and not group space or not co-working. So for now, but they're the closest I've come to having kind of a mission alignment and a place that recognizes that we all feel social anxiety sometimes. We all feel tired. We're not production robots, and we need places that are sensitive to our sensitivities, and we don't need to feel shame about those things. And I guess this is a good way to end our retreat space, where we're having a 12-hour make space on Monday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Joanna will bring her sound table for sound healing. This is an amazing story. Well, the way we've designed the space is it's on an introvert to extrovert spectrum. So when you come in, you can immediately sense how you feel, and you don't have to feel shame if you don't want to get to work yet, you want to hang out with people, or if you don't want to deal with people, social, you can go upstairs. So the upstairs has quiet private rooms and healing rooms. The middle part has a bunch of pillows, and it's considered ambivert area. So if you want to be quiet and read and write, or if you want to hang out with other people, the big living room area is kind of like a yoga reading room. And then outside, the hot tub is an outdoor living room. So if you want to be social and hang out with people, so basically you choose your adventure rather than having to, because you commute to this office, because you show up here, you're suddenly on call now for 8 hours, and maybe that's not how you feel that given day, and corporations don't really care, but we're trying to add some sensitivity to the workplace and to our work culture. Thank you all so much. I'm thinking if you want to, you can just hang out too, but if you want to do creative therapy stuff, maybe come to this side of the room, and then if you want to just work and not do anything structured, or you can be on this side. But otherwise, I'll just be here to answer questions, and this helps spread the word. We're growing quickly. We have gatherings tomorrow, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the following Sunday, the 25th. And I just made a promo code that says General Assembly for all of our Fridays. So if you want to come, you can get a discount for all of the 3 remaining Fridays in October. So you just type in General Assembly, and then it will immediately discount the last 3. You're welcome to spread that with other people, because the more the merrier. You guys get it, and they'll get it, and it'll be great. So thanks again.